politics there in Albany, New York. He's a reporter for the Times-Union newspaper, here to discuss the latest on the Andrew Cuomo saga and scandals. Some of his power, Edward, was stripped today because of those scandals. What happened?
Yeah, the Democrats for about the last month have been trying to hammer out a deal to agree between the Assembly and the Senate, which are both controlled by the Democrats, about the best way to strip away the emergency powers that they granted to Governor Cuomo almost exactly 1 year ago, right at the beginning of COVID. So those powers basically gave him the ability to issue any directive, to rewrite existing law, to do anything that he felt was necessary to deal with the ongoing disaster. So he's used that to, require mask wearing, to have restrictions on restaurant capacity, and everything that falls under that. So all along, the legislature at any point could have voted with just with a majority to overturn those orders, and they have not done so. So the sort of political undercurrent here is that the legislature has allowed Governor Cuomo to really micromanage every aspect of the state's response to this. But now that he seems to be, polls show that he's losing ground a little bit politically with the nursing home scandal and with the sexual harassment scandal. There's been a lot more pressure for the legislature to reassert itself. Republicans have been pushing on this for some time. And today was the day that the Democrats announced that they had come to a deal, and a Senate source told me that they're expected to vote formally on that on Friday.
So will it strip all those powers, or just limit them in their entirety?
So I think it's probably most accurate to refer to it as a limitation. He's not going to be able to write brand new orders, but the existing, mask wearing, restaurant capacity, the existing orders that are on the books to deal with the pandemic will stay where they are. And he'll have the ability to edit or renew them. So for instance, let's say restaurant capacity is at 25% in New York City. Later next month, he could say, well, now it can go to 50%. But he can't write brand new orders. And that's the main thing. That's the sort of key emergency power, is the ability to legislate as the governor, to write laws. And he can't do that now. And the legislature retains the ability to reject these orders. He has to go to them for comment and review to the committee chairs, and then that could go to the full body.
And is it safe to say, though, that the only reason this is happening now, rather than 1 month, 2 months ago, is because of these compounding scandals?
I certainly think that some Republicans would have that viewpoint here in the state, and that they've said that this is something that's far too late. I think certainly if you look back 2 months ago, where we're still sort of coming down the curve from the holidays that we've seen with COVID, there was a very, very strong argument that could be made by the governor at that point, that with the number of deaths and hospitalizations, he still would need all of the power that he had available to him. And I know that, the governor's team, it has become almost a running joke for them on social media to respond to this by saying, at any point the legislature already could overturn these, and they're choosing not to do so.
I see. Let's kind of go into the investigation being conducted by the New York State Attorney General's office, Tish James, who is going to appoint an independent investigator to look at these sexual harassment claims against the governor. There's now 3 of them being made by 3 different women. What's the latest on that?
Yeah, so the latest on that, so Ms. Lindsay Boylan, who lives down in New York City, and she used to work in the Empire State Development Corporation, she came forward with allegations of sexual harassment against the governor back in December, but she chose not to have her claims vetted, and she chose not to elaborate on them, vetted with the press, So when she came forward last week with a personal essay with a lot more detail and with some specific emails that seemed to show that it was discussed in the office that the governor sort of had a crush on her or was interested in her, so that added a lot more interest and a lot more attention to her story. And a few days later, the New York Times published an account of a second woman, Charlotte Bennett, alleging that the governor had made sexual remarks to her, that he had asked her if she liked to sleep with older men, that he had sort of communicated to her that he was interested in sleeping with her. And then a third woman came forward on last night, Monday night, and said that he had grabbed her face at a wedding and tried to kiss her. So over the weekend, you know, it was kind of a hurricane, honestly, as a reporter. Right. So he issued a public statement that said, here's my comment. You know, we're gonna have this lawyer that I'm choosing, and they're gonna do a review of this, and I'll have no further comment. Well, within the next 12 hours, he had a number of other further comments, and he had changed his mind another 2 times. So he said, you know, we're gonna have this lawyer handle it. It's gonna be handled internally. And most of the Democrats in the state, and I say the Democrats, you know, Republicans were obviously outraged about this as well, but here in Albany with supermajorities in both chambers, Cuomo is really sort of locked in on where the Democrats are at because they control everything. So they made it clear, you know, that's not going to work for us. And it's been reported that the Attorney General, Tish James, and the Senate Majority Leader and the Speaker of the Assembly got together and basically decided, okay, we're going to demand a full Senate or a full Attorney General investigation, which here in New York requires a referral from the governor's office. So Cuomo then backpedals and he says, well, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to let the Attorney General choose a lawyer to do this review, and they'll choose it along with a judge from the state Supreme Court that I've selected. And the Democratic leader said, nope, that's still not good enough. So then a few hours later, we get the full concession from Cuomo where he says, okay, Tish James will get the referral that she needed to start this investigation. And now we're sort of off to the races.
And quite stunning, though, for Governor Cuomo's fellow state office holders who serve alongside him in those roles to essentially and publicly go against him. He's known as quite the strong hand in New York State. And so let's talk about some of those Democrats, though. And there are several, there could be more in the following days, who are calling for his resignation. Do you see more of those coming out?
I do. If I could just back up to one point you just made there that I think is an important one, and that's that, you know, for the last few years, this has been reported out that people have sort of speculated that there's a close relationship between Tish James and Andrew Cuomo and that they were sort of allies. So an interesting undercurrent here is that the nursing home report that started the first wave of these scandals was actually kicked off from a report released by the state attorney general's office, and her office had not given Governor Cuomo a heads up before that. The embargoed announcement that was sent out to reporters actually said, don't tell the governor, don't ask him for comment before this is published. So this was very much, you know, a blindsiding. And in the leaked transcript of the private meeting that was led by Melissa DeRosa, the governor's top aide, right, she actually alluded to the fact that, you know, they were blindsided by this report. So the subtext of this dynamic about him being resistant to turn the investigation over to Tish James is this fact that, you know, 35 days ago or whenever that report came out, you know, she blindsided them. But to answer your question, you know, it's definitely true that over particularly the last 24 hours, we've seen more and more Democrats calling for the governor's resignation. The first state level Democrat here was State Senator Alessandra Biaggi on Sunday. And today, you know, we've seen a lot of younger, particularly progressive Democrats. Although I did speak with one source that I would call more of a left of center, but sort of moderate Democrat. And the way that person said was basically that Cuomo has not been beloved by the progressives for some time, okay, and that this might be their chance to sort of take him out. And when you think about the political liabilities that he has with the nursing homes and now with the sexual harassment, it kind of reminds me of that quote from The Wire, you know, if you're going to come with the king, you best not miss. Yeah. So it's a little bit like, okay, the people who have been critical about Cuomo since they were elected in the last few years are also the first ones to call for his resignation. So it's interesting to note that, at least.
And because a statement from the state Democratic Party today essentially said, you know, let's wait for the Attorney General's investigation to be concluded before we, you know, comment or make a judgment as a party. And so it kind of an effort by the state party to, you know, kind of tell everyone to calm down about these calls for resignation. But let's talk about, because there is an impeachment effort underway. Have any Democrats joined that, or is that just Republican-led in the Assembly?
So it's my understanding that that's just Republican-led at this point, although the undercurrent of anyone that is requesting resignation is, or what. So I feel like if someone is saying, you should resign, you've sort of walked to the end of the road of available options to you. So I think you're sort of implicitly saying that you would support some sort of effort to remove someone if they then refuse to resign, although we haven't seen much movement on that. I was actually doing some research on that question of impeachment proceedings today, and it is different from the way that they do it federally. The state appeals court judges are actually jurors in the trial. I spoke with a lawyer who was talking about it, and there's a lot of sort of up in the air questions because there's not a lot of precedent. There's only been one impeachment trial of a governor in New York history.
Oh, wow. I did not know that. See, let's talk about kind of 2022 right now, because the governor is in his second term. He wants to run for a third term, presumably. We interviewed yesterday. Fourth term, rather. We interviewed Mark Molinaro yesterday here on NewsNOW, asking him about his prospects. Would he run for governor again, like he did in 2018? He wouldn't say. He said people are encouraging him to do so, but unlikely. Obviously, a Republican could win statewide in New York. That remains to be seen. But will he have any primary challengers in 2022?
That's actually a question that we on the ground here in reporting have been really interested to see as well. I've definitely been keeping an eye on the potential Republican field. And it's funny you mentioned Mark Molinaro. I actually had a funny interaction with him on Twitter today because Lee Zeldin, the representative from Long Island, a Republican, announced that he's considering a run for for governor. And that had been something that was sort of floating around, and people knew that he had done polling. And I retweeted at Mark Molinaro. I said, hey, if you have anything you need to announce, give me a call. And he retweeted that. And, I think if you're in New York politics, you've been getting Mark Molinaro fundraising emails, and it's been widely reported that he's, strongly considering another run. So he hasn't, said it yet, but I would expect that, very soon. There's a number of other Republicans. Tom Reed down over Western New York is another person that's been reported to be considering a run. And the Times-Union reported that Lee Stefanik had about 6 months ago spoken with some people near her, expressing that she was potentially interested. She also has been fundraising, calling Governor Cuomo the worst governor in America. So it definitely seems like Republicans are seeing that there's an opportunity in 2022. And as for the Democratic challengers, Governor Cuomo has faced challengers from the progressive left in each of his last two re-elections. Mm-hmm. He frankly, swapped them pretty good, I think. So there's a lot of questions in the air in terms of where his political liability is. But I think his popularity will go down a lot more with Republicans than it will with Democrats.
And just lastly for you, Edward, he's weathered many, many scandals before. He's quite politically resilient. Now that this one is compounded with the nursing home COVID death scandal and the sexual harassment allegations, do you think this one is different?
Yeah, I think, I haven't been in New York long enough to have covered all of the scandals that other people have. People with a little bit longer memory will know about the Moreland Commission, for instance, which was examining public corruption, and that Governor Cuomo shut it down. But I think for a lot of people, there's a sense of sort of compounding scandal, and it's steamrolling a little bit, and it's sort of raised these new and troubling questions about what's going on here. So for instance, the reporting that we've seen about the governor's sort of bullying behavior, he's calling people up, he's yelling at them, he's making political threats. These are things that when you're popular and when things are going well, people view it as, oh, wow, that's effective. You don't want to cross the governor because that he might, get after you, and he's popular and he's accomplishing things through these tactics, and that's making it more popular, which is making the threats more effective. So it all sort of steamrolls. But then when it starts to unravel a little bit, when you have the nursing homes, and then you have people making these allegations of sexual harassment, and now all of a sudden these stories about threatening behavior, they start to take on a little bit of a different light. And I think that it just sort of all escalates into negative perception. And I think we've seen that expressed in the polling numbers over the last month or so.
All right. Well, Edward McKinley, we thank you so much. Political reporter for the Times-Union newspaper there in Albany, New York. Hope to see you again here on NewsNOW from